Okay, welcome back. It's time to put some of the skills that we've learned to the test. We're going to craft a pretty complicated patch here, and it's going to be an electro drum loop that sounds sort of like this. So that's a lot of fun, and let's just start from scratch here. So new sound, and the first thing that we're going to do is make sure that our tempo and global settings are set up right. So I'm going to go to the global page, and I'm going to turn the beats per minute down to about 90 because I want a nice slow beat like that. And then in your voicing tab, I'm going to go to monophonic like that because I don't want to be playing multiple notes at the same time. So now we need to set up each instrument, and you can go about it in different ways, but I like to set up the kick drum first, so let's do that. So up in oscillator 1, we're going to choose a sine wave, pull our wavetable position all the way to the left, and then I'm going to send it completely to filter 1 because we're going to have to send these oscillators to different filters in order to create some different filtering of the different sounds in our little loop. Okay, so sine wave, wavetable position all the way to the left, and send it to filter 1, and it should sound like this. Just a nice little sine wave. So the next thing I'm going to do is choose LFO number 5 and make it a performer rather than an LFO. I'm also going to sync it up to 16th notes like this. And now let's flatten both of these curves. So we're starting from scratch. And now I'm going to choose the load curve button and choose this shape for my transients. So if I press the shift button, remember that I can select multiple steps at the same time. So I'm going to put one on 1, 3, not 5, 6, and 9. And then on step 8, I'm going to create a ghost note, maybe about like that. And then maybe just for fun, we can put one of these on the 14th step like that. And so this performer needs to be applied to the amplitude because this is the volume, the output of the kick drum. So I'm going to put this over here in the amplitude knob modulation slot, turn the knob down, and then create the modulation range up at the top. So that'll sound like this. And then maybe I'm hearing I would like maybe one more curve here. Maybe not there. Maybe right here. This one will turn down. That kind of creates a cool stutter at the end. Now, one thing I'm hearing is that I forgot to set up our amplitude envelope here, the 4th envelope. The default looks like this, but we need to reduce the attack and the release, and then increase the sustain level so we have a nice full, just straight ahead envelope here. Okay, so that's how that sounds now. We've got a lot further to go, but we have a little kick drum pattern. So what I'm going to do is pitch this down a little bit. Maybe about 2 octaves like this. And I'm going to use this same performer to create a little bit of a chirp and a little bit of movement in my kick drum. So I'm going to drop the 5th performer into both of these. The first one I'm going to raise up pretty high, maybe about to 24. And then the second one I'm going to drop down maybe about halfway. And this will just give us that nice bend on that kick drum. So you can hear that. It has a little bit of a bend now. Okay, so the second thing we're going to do is set up a snare. So for oscillator 2, let's choose a triangle wave. Move our wavetable position over. And let's send it to filter 2. And now this will sound sort of like this. We're going to raise the pitch up, maybe about here. Okay, we just want a nice little bell sound. And now we're going to set up another performer using the 6th modulation source here. So choose performer, and then I'm going to drop all these down like this, flatten them out so we can see what we're doing. I'm going to sync it, but only to quarter notes, because I only need 2 transients here. I'm also going to shorten my sequencer steps from 16 to just 4, because all we need is a note on 2 and a note on 4. So load curve, and I want a sharp transient, so I'm going to choose this curve here. Oops, and drop it into 2 and 4, but not 1 or 3. So that'll just give us a snare beat, a snare on beats 2 and 4. And this performer will move to the amplitude of oscillator 2. And then same thing as with 1, we're going to reduce the amplitude knob, turn the modulation range all the way up to the top. So now that will sound like this. And then if you put both together, so it's not super exciting just yet, but I promise we'll get there. The next thing that I'm going to do is create a sort of a tonal sound, a little melody with the square wave in oscillator 3. So let's deactivate these other 2, so we're just dealing with oscillator 3. So I'm going to keep it as a square wave. I'm going to choose the 7th modulation source as a stepper, and this will be our arpeggiation. I'm going to pull it into the modulation slot and create an octave range, so that way we have an entire octave to work here. Make sure that snap to grid is selected so that you're choosing whole notes for these notes, unless you don't want to, but I like to do that. And let's sync it up to 16th notes. And let's create a little bit of a pattern. Let's have it be maybe 7, 7, 7, 10, 5, 3, 2, something like that. So that should sound sort of like this. Oh, the amplitude needs to go up. Now you have a couple options here. You can also use that same stepper in the amplitude knob. This is kind of a cool trick, so that only those notes where you have something going on will the amplitude swing in. That way you don't just have full volume across the entire length of the thing. You can use this 7th stepper in the amplitude as well. And so that way, when you apply it this way, rather than these amplitudes in each step corresponding with a note in the scale, now these amplitudes are controlling the amount of this knob, the amplitude knob. So they should correspond pretty nicely. Or what you can do, which is kind of fun too, is take your 5th performer, which is what is modulating the amplitude of our kick drum, and use that as an amplitude modulator. And so that way your notes are only going to be swelling in with the kick drum. So altogether, it'll sound something like this for now. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. It's still not too exciting, but we need to set up this modulation oscillator a little bit. So I'm going to increase the pitch of the mod oscillator and choose the phase modulation for my snare drum. So let's just get this tuned in right. Okay, so that's pretty cool. And now what I want to do is take this same stepper, or performer, number 6, that's modulating our snare drum, the amplitude of our snare drum, and I want to drop it into this phase knob for the modulation oscillator, which is assigned to oscillator 2, and have it all the way down, and then create a range like this. So that means on these attacks for the snare drum, this phase knob is going to be moving around. It'll sound like this. And I can change the pitch a little bit if I want some more dissonance there. That gives a little bit more body. I like that more than at 12. Okay, so now let's put it all together and see what we got. So we've already got a pretty cool little groove. It still sounds a little bit cold to me, but we will work on that in a moment once we get some of these inserts and filters set up. We're still just dealing with the raw sounds. So now let's set up a hi-hat pattern. I'm going to move down to my noise section. You can either choose the white noise, sounds like this, for your hi-hat. I think the metallic is a pretty good hi-hat sound as well. Okay. So I'm going to choose that. And then for this one, let's choose the 8th stepper here, performer, and assign this to the amplitude. And I don't want the amplitude to go up all the way, so I'm going to turn this down and then have my range go up to about here. So if I sync up my 8th performer to 16th notes as well, it will sound like this. And that's pretty cool. It's a little bit boring, but when we put everything together, we're getting somewhere. But what if we had more fun with this hi-hat performer? We can choose one that's already in here, maybe back and forth. Hear how that sounds. That's nice. So I like that one a lot. That feels pretty good to me. And then I'm probably going to play with this crossfader as well. Cool. All right, so we got a little hi-hat groove going now as well. I'm going to send the noise generator to filter 2. Okay. Now we want to make sure that our filters are set up in parallel because we're processing these different oscillators differently, and we want to get a pure signal into filter 2 so that we can send oscillators 2 and 3 through that one exclusively and then have it down mixed at the end. And so we're going to keep this mix right in the middle. I'm going to turn both filter outputs all the way up. So for our kick drum, we might want a low-pass filter. And so let's just work on the kick drum filter. For now, I'll deactivate all of these. And now if we want to, we can take that 5th performer and use it to modulate this cutoff as well. So now we have a little bit of pluck at the beginning. But with those attacks, this cutoff knob is sweeping down according to this little pattern that we have here. That's pretty cool. If you want, you can try experimenting with some of these other filters, like maybe a scream and increasing this. Daft. I like the way that sounds, so I'm just going to leave that as it is for now. And then we'll work with our snare drum, which is going into filter number 2. So you can choose maybe a high pass filter like this. If you want to cut off some of that body. It's got a little bit of a belly sound. That's kind of cool. If you want to, you can try maybe like a band reject. That's got kind of a cool sound too. I like that as well. Now we've got our patterns going. We've got a kick, snare, melody, and hi-hat. Now it's time to use some inserts and feedback. That's going to be a big part of this sound. So I'm going to go to my routing page and look at what's going on here. I want to have insert number 1 happening before filter 2. And that is because I'm going to use filter number 1 to give some bite. Insert number 1 to give a little bit of bite and drive to the snare and the melody and the hi-hat, but I don't want it affecting the kick drum. If I put it here or after the filters, then it would be affecting that kick drum. Rather, I want to have it before filter 2, and that way this insert will take effect on the audio that I'm putting into it before it gets to filter 2, but we're not sending any of the kick drum to filter 2 because our filter spread is up here. Okay. So I'm going to choose, let's choose the sine shaper here and just increase the dry wet and the drive. And you can try the hard clipper if you want a little bit dirtier of a distortion. Now I'm going to put insert number 2 before the filter number 1. So insert number 2 is going to affect the kick drum, but not the others, because it's here going before the filter 1, and only the kick drum is going into filter 1. We're getting a little bit of the noise section going into filter 1, but that's okay. So insert number 2, let's choose, well, we can try out a few different things. Sine shaper would sound like this. And let's turn these off. That gives a little bit of drive, which is cool. We can try the sample and hold to give a little bit of that digital bit crush kind of sound. And so all three put together would sound like this. Okay, now the other thing that I want to do is put the feedback after the filter number 1. And that way we can create some nice warmth to that kick drum. And I'll turn the feedback up a little bit. Okay, so I'm just tweaking some of these parameters here to get that sound that I want coming out. And the other thing that I might do at the end of all of this is choose some master effects to go along. Like, for example, the classic tube would be a good thing to have to create some tube warmth. And then I would also make sure that my EQ is set up how I want it to be. Right now I'm not getting enough of this kick drum punch that I want. So I'm going to make sure that the low shelf is turned up. Okay, so that's sounding pretty cool. I like it. And then the last thing that I would do after my EQ setup is I would assign some macro controls so that I can adjust these parameters. So one thing that I could do is set up one macro control for this amplitude and use the sidechain mechanism to control the amplitude. So that means I can have my kick drum out of the picture like that. And I can bring it in by turning this up. So I would call this kick. And same thing can be accomplished with the snare drum. Just select sidechain, call this snare, like that. Bring the snare in. Like that, that's pretty cool. And then hi-hat, like this. Bring this over here to the amplitude, sidechain it like that. Just like that. And the same thing can be true with assigning macro controls to other parameters. Like we can control the amplitude of the feedback by creating a little modulation range like that. Call this for feedback, like that. And then that way I can have no feedback. Bring it in. Like that. Okay, so that's our electro drum loop tutorial, and we will see you in the next lecture.